Marissa, it is so good to be with you today.
So happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I was in your home, which happens to be like less than a mile from my home, coincidentally, just a couple days ago, doing a reading with you. Which I have to be honest with you, I'm always open minded, but I'm also skeptical. Like I'm hyper practical and on one side, and then I'm totally open to like anything's possible. So so I was really like intrigued. Our friend Hillary recommended you very highly, and so it's good to be with you again. And you just led me through. What did you call that? Just an opening or a grounding?
Grounding, yes.
A grounding practice off camera. And then as soon as I said, hey, when we start recording, can you just lead me and everybody listening through that again, or just me through it, whatever works for you. But so I'd love to invite you to lead me through that, lead us through that, and then we'll get into the conversation.
Perfect. Of course. I love starting all conversations in this way because I think it brings us a little deeper instead of on the surface. So I'll just invite you to take one hand over your belly and one hand over your heart space if you are able to do that where you are right now. And just taking a nice breath into your belly, filling it up with air. And just exhaling and imagining that air moving up into your heart space on this exhale. Again, breathing into your belly, this time bringing in a white light as though you're filling it up with your belly with the air and just moving that white light and the air up into your heart space on the exhale. Again, inhaling, filling not only the front of your belly this time, but seeing if you can bring it into your lower back as well, as though you're getting a big hug from your air and your light and just bringing it up to your heart space on the exhale. This time I want you to inhale into your heart space, filling your heart space with that white light and that love and light and air. And exhaling, moving that air up to your throat space on the exhale. Again, into your heart space to expand not only the front, but the back of your heart as well, and moving it up into your throat on the exhale. One more at our heart, allowing it to expand even bigger. Even holding your breath for a second, you just feel all that light and love around you. And moving it up into your throat space this time. Now, I want you to focus right on your throat and see if you can breathe, imagining that the air is expanding around the front and the back of your neck here. On the exhale, moving that energy all the way up to the crown of your head. Again, expanding into your throat, the front, the side, the back of it. And moving that energy all the way up to the crown of your head. One more, inhaling in, expanding, drenching this whole space with this warm hug, and exhaling all the way to the crown of your head. Now I just want you to imagine that there's this white light at the crown of your head and it's shooting upwards. As you watch, as you inhale, imagining that light moves upwards about 3 feet above your head. And on this time on the exhale, I want you to imagine that you're receiving that white light right back into you. Meeting you back at your crown of your head. Inhaling, allowing that energy to move upward. Exhaling, allowing that energy to be received right back at where it started. One more, inhaling in and moving that energy up about 3 feet. Holding your breath, I want you to imagine that white light gets so big right there. It's where we meet our guides, our angels, our loved ones, all of our soul's wisdom. And I want you to imagine that there's just this big waterfall of light. On the exhale, it just drenches through your whole body, just comes all around your limbs, your whole torso, your whole body. Just allowing your breath to return to normal as you just feel this energy around you. We often think of the heavens as this faraway place. And when we remind ourselves that all of the guidance and wisdom is right here, we're able to see that our body, our soul's body, comes out to about 3 feet around us. And that is exactly where we meet these guides and angels and loved ones. And so we just call in all of their energy to surround us with love and light during this beautiful time together. And with that, I say amen.
Amen. Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
So getting back to the practical side of me,
yes.
Although this is for sure not as black and white as we'd hope it would be, but today I really want people to help people tune into their intuition. And intuition it's right. It is a very like not black and white concept, because people are like, well, is that my intuition? Is that my subconscious? Are they one and the same? Is that God? Is that my fear? Right? Like, and I know that I struggle with this, like trying to tune into intuition. But when I get these downloads, this wisdom, it usually I know that it's coming from something other than my mind when I'm writing it so fast in my journal that I don't know what I'm going to write. I'm not thinking it through. It's not something I'm accessing from my subconscious or deeper part of my mind. It's literally like, whoa, what am I writing? So when I go to your website, thesoulsorceress.com, it says, discover the profound power of your intuition with guidance from someone who's walked that path. So here's what I want to start by asking. Who are you? Big question. Who are you? And what is this path that you've walked that enables you to help people discover the profound power of their intuition?
Great question. So I use the soul sorceress. It's spelled like source and then rest, because this came through in knowing that it's not about what I do. It's actually that you are the source. We all are the source for our own intuition and guidance. And I love the word intuition. And I also think that it's really overused. And so I think we get a little muddled in like, what does this actually mean? And so in my own experience, what happened is, I always had that idea of what intuition was, but I didn't really like truly understand it until I was a stay-at-home mom with 2 little girls. Yeah. And my next door neighbor passed away, and he appeared to me and started giving me messages to give to his loved ones. And I thought I was maybe going a little crazy, especially with lack of sleep with 2 little kids. Yeah. And so I ended up giving her a reading. It kind of gave myself away that I knew how he passed away when that information wasn't released. And so I gave a reading not knowing what I was doing. I wrote, actually. I got a journal out and just wrote these things that were coming through. And all the messages were things that were resonating. Like, they were talking about how they wanted to spread his ashes. And the first thing was like, yes to the boat. And that was what they were thinking of doing. And so there was just all these pieces, and it very instantly changed my life, because within 24 hours after that, I had experiences of walking and hearing spirit guides. And I will say, I was like, is this real? Is this possible? Yeah. But I started hearing messages for people like on the street, and I would go up to them and give them messages. And one of the first ones was like, I was like, do you have a grandfather named Henry? And this woman was like, yeah. And I was like, okay, he wants you to know he can walk again. And she's like, he was in a wheelchair my whole life. And so there was just these parts, and like, I can't deny that this is real. Like,
they were so specific that you're like, okay, this isn't like do you ever feel tired in the morning? And the person's like, oh my gosh, you're a psychic, right? You're like, yeah, no, these are very specific. Do you have a grandfather named Henry? He wants you to know he can walk. Okay.
Yes. So it was all of these things. And I think I needed that proof in public, essentially, for it to happen. And actually, what's interesting about the Henry story is she said, oh, his name was John Henry. And so when I walked away, I said to I didn't know what to call it at that time, but to the spirit, to the voices coming through, I was like, well, why don't you say John? And he said, if I had said John, you would have convinced yourself that it's just a common name and you wouldn't have been able to pick it up. So I had to use Henry because you wouldn't have been able to deny, like, you can't deny that. And I was like, touche. Like, I think
that's interesting. Everybody's got a handful of Johns in their life, right?
Exactly. So that was a helpful part. And, it really, within a 6-month span, I went from this happening to getting very loud messages that I couldn't deny anymore. Like, it was like, these are just coming through, and it told me that I needed to launch a business to help people. And I didn't really know what that meant at the time. I was like, oh, I'll do mediumship, and that's what this is. But what actually happened is that all of these abilities unfolded. And so it started with mediumship, and then it turned into seeing past life regressions and seeing the future, and being able to find trauma pinpoints in people's lives that we needed to really work through, and helping families as their loved ones cross to the other side. And so many parts, like, it just keeps opening and opening. And the reason why I find that this happened at this time in my life, like, I thought you had to be born with these abilities. And I
And
realized
you
that
were how
that's,
old when this started
I
happening?
was almost 35.
Okay.
So not something I was like, oh, yeah, you either have that or you don't. Like, why would I ever think? I always was fascinated by it. Like
Yeah.
I used to watch the Long Island Medium and I was like, this is so cool, but didn't ever think that I would be able to do that.
Yeah.
And so now I get to help people do it themselves, because I always say that God or spirit or whatever energy you want to call it gave me the blueprint on how to teach others to do the same thing. That I'm actually not special in any way. I just have tapped in and learned to trust it. And we
Yeah.
all have access to it. And sometimes it should, like, yes, that doesn't mean you have to go and talk to dead people, but you can, but
Yeah.
you can use it for yourself, right? We want to be able to be like, this is my path and this is what I'm hearing. I trust that this intuition or my soul's voice is guiding me. And I want to be able to like actually fully trust that. And so that's my favorite thing that I get to do now with people.
That's amazing. Yeah, for me, I call them downloads or breakthroughs, but I've
Yes.
gotten them for quite a few. I don't know how long, maybe my whole life, right? But I don't know. But when I started documenting them, it's been quite, probably 7 years ago or something. That I'm writing, like I said, faster than I can possibly think. It's just coming through me, and then I look back, and I'm like, oh, that's such profound truth and wisdom for me.
Yes.
And it's interesting when I am struggling, and I actually struggle with the cognitive part of my brain from chemotherapy and stuff. So it's hard for me to actually try to think. That's actually really hard for me.
Mm.
And it creates like frustration and anxiety and insecurity, because I'm like, what is wrong with me? My brain doesn't work like it used to. And then I'm like, okay, time to just quiet my mind and meditate and like pray, meditate and clear my mind, and then have a journal nearby. And when I
Yes.
do that, then it's like, oh, brilliant insight. Write that down, which leads to another, which leads to another. You know what I mean? So it's really interesting. And kind of like you, it happened for me like by almost by default, by accident. It wasn't like I planned it or anything like that. I'm just curious, were you raised in a particular religious tradition? Like, how did your upbringing shape your beliefs around spirituality and what you would call the spirit world?
It's a good question. I always say my mom was searching for my childhood. Like we were
Yeah.
always dabbling in a new church or endeavor. But when I was 11, we landed at Self Realization Fellowship, which it was in the Pacific
Ah,
Palisades. Yeah, so it's a church of all
yeah.
religions.
My father-in-law goes there.
Really?
I've been there. I love it. Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Yeah, and it got saved in the fires by incredible people that go to the church. And so, I feel like that was my really deep dive into trusting spirituality. But it was actually because of my Sunday school teacher. We had this amazing Sunday school teacher for all of middle school and all of high school. She somehow finagled it that like she would only work with us, and like she kept changing the ages. So like our group of girls, and there was like 12 of us, and we went every Sunday, even when we could drive ourselves, and we would
Mm.
go, because she made it about come and talk about whatever you want. Talk about boys, talk about issues with your parents, talk about sex. Like literally it was like nothing is off the table, but then we're going to kind of bring in like, how does God relate to this? How does
Mhm.
spirituality relate to this? So that it didn't feel like these two separate things of like, this is your church life and this is your regular life. And it was so fun and so like light that it allowed me to have both. But then interestingly, the church, they found out that she was doing it not by the books in any way, shape, or form. So they stopped our Sunday school group when we were, I think, juniors in high school.
Yeah.
And it really threw off my trust in like what I thought I had found of like the two worlds mixing together. And so I really did shut off my belief system for quite a few years, because it felt like if it's not this way, then I can't do it. And so when I discovered this, I had to get back into relationship with God, which I
Mm.
was like, oh, how do I feel about this? How does I feel about this word? Because it felt so religious before,
Yeah.
or how, and so I had to kind of move through that. And now I'm like, oh, it's an energy. And it totally is like what my Sunday school teacher did for us. So like, it's not these separate things. It's part of who we are. And when we can allow that to flow in, then life is so much greater and brighter and led.
Yeah. This morning, coincidentally, I had an idea for something came through me probably 6 months ago, and I just wrote down a couple of notes. And this morning, I finally fleshed it out. And it's this concept that I call, it came through me as the God paradigms. And it's right.
Mm.
It's like God is our Lord and Savior is one paradigm.
Yes.
God is our experience is another paradigm.
Mm.
God is the universal energy that all things are made of is another paradigm, right? Like it's these paradigms, and can they coexist? And so this morning, it came through me to like actually type out like a blog sized portion of what'll be probably a chapter in my next book. But it's interesting.
I love that. And I think you're sharing the creativity aspect that you're talking about. And for you, it's writing, right? Like, I think that is overlooked so much in how we can tap in and how we can connect, because creativity is truly intuition. It's like where God or energy moves through us. And I always say writing's the best one because everyone can write pretty much. And so it's like a great way of tapping in, because we sometimes think of creativity as, oh, I have to sing a song or be a dancer. But it's like, actually, creativity is just energy moving through you. You're allowing the space for it to move through. And when you can do it in writing, I host a free writing group every Monday, because I'm like, this is a space where you can tune in and allow yourself to trust what is coming through. Sometimes you have to see it on paper to like be like, oh, that's real. I can trust this.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So let's dive into intuition.
Yes.
I just Googled it right before our episode. I want to see how's Google define it? It's the ability to understand something immediately without the need for conscious reasoning. Now, that's one definition. I don't know that I would. Yeah, I'm curious. Obviously, this is your world. For me, that doesn't align with my definition of like, I don't understand necessarily what I'm writing down without conscious reasoning. So for me, it's more like the ability to channel or download information or insights or paradigms or perspectives without conscious reasoning. So that would be how I would define it.
Yeah.
So whether or not you want to define it, I really want to like, how do we help people tap into their intuition first? To me, it's like, okay, number one, how do you even start to access it and
Yes.
know if that's what you're like? Number one, how do you access it? Number two, how do you trust? How do you trust that you're accessing it and that it's not your overactive imagination? And I shared earlier, like for me, I know it's because it's coming through me so fast that I'm not thinking it. If I'm thinking of my fears, I know that I'm thinking of past, experiences. So so number one, how do we access our intuition? And number two, how do we trust it? And number three, maybe how do we act on it?
Great questions. Let's start with how we access it. So I'm going to do a little exercise with you so that we can tune in. So this is something that just came through, and I keep going back to it again and again. And the image that I've always had is like a rocking chair, and that in life, we're always in this rocking chair. And it's essentially like when we lean forward, that's when we're in our trust. That's when we're in our flow state. That's when we're in an intuitive space. But no matter what, even if that's like majority of our life that we feel like we are in, we always rock back. We always go back into the self-doubt, or I don't know if I can do this, or this next new milestone. But the more we rock forward, we're going to keep going back into that space. So this exercise is kind of taken from that model, essentially. So I'm going to have you close your eyes with me. And I want you to rock back and forth like you're in a rocking chair, and just kind of move forward and backward. And just kind of feel this energy that is coming as you rock back and forth. And I want you to just pause in your forward rock for a moment when you get there. And just pause right here. And I want you to ask, is this my yes? And this is you just want to kind of feel, is this my yes? Don't try to make it mean anything, and just kind of feel how your body feels. Do you feel a resistance? Do you feel a softness? Do you feel an ease? And then without overthinking it, I want you to rock backwards. And I want you to ask that same question. Is this my yes? And notice if there's a difference in the response that's coming through. Maybe it feels a little bit lighter. Maybe it actually feels a little heavier. Not trying to make it mean one or the other. And then we're going to do the same thing. You're going to rock forward again. And you're going to ask, is this my no? And I want you to just notice the sensations that happen, that come up. Notice if you feel a little bit calmer, maybe you feel a little bit more uncomfortable, just listening to your body. And then rock into the opposite direction and ask the same thing. Is this my no? And notice how you feel. And then coming back to center. So what we want to go with is the one that felt easier, the one that felt lighter is the one that is that direction. So if we said, if yes forward felt a little bit lighter, that's going to be your yes. If the no in the back felt a little bit lighter, that's your no. We just want to make sure they're not the same, that they're one or the other. Did you find which one felt more pulled for yes or for no?
Yeah, my forward was for sure yes. It was like moving forward, yes. And then
Yes.
backward was like regressing, contracting, no.
Okay. So that's usually a common one, and everyone is different. So sometimes it can change. If this didn't resonate, I know it resonated for you, but if this didn't resonate for someone that's listening, you can also rock side to side as though you're rocking chairs, like moving side to side. Sometimes for some people, this is an easier one than the others. I find majority of people are forward and back, but there are some people that can't, and it's side to side instead. So you're going to do the same thing. If yours didn't work front to back, you're going to try to your left side and to your right, and you're going to ask, is this my yes? And is this my yes to both sides? And then is this my no to both sides? And you're just going to find which is your yes and which is your no. And so once you have the energy for yourself of like, oh, this is my clear yes, and this is my clear no, you're going to just sit straight up, nice and tall. And I want you to ask something super simple, like whatever it is that you maybe thought about having for dinner tonight. Like, should I have chicken for dinner tonight? Or should I don't know,
Should I play basketball even though it's out of my comfort zone?
Okay, there you go. Yes, should I play basketball? You want to do something that's like easy, that's like, you're like, okay, this isn't really necessarily, doesn't have a lot of weight on the question. Like if you're like, oh, if I play basketball, then there's somebody that would be there and it's this big opportunity, don't ask that question. Or it's a big date night, don't ask the chicken, but have like nothing that really matters on either way. So you're going to ask about the basketball and you're just going to ask this question. And I want you to notice if you can just let go and see if your body can pull you a little bit forward or a little bit back. It's not going to feel as drastic as the full rock forward or back, but just kind of notice which way your body starts to sway. You finding yourself leaning in a certain direction?
Yes, it's pulling me, gently pulling me forward.
Okay. So that right there is like the gentle pull is exactly what our intuition is. It's always like a little whisper, a little pull. It's not going to be this big, huge tilt forward. It's just this little whisper. And almost like what we can even do to kind of feel into what our brain likes to do is if you lean in the opposite direction. So think of the same question and just lean back a little bit and notice if your mind starts to chatter or starts to turn on. Does it get a little louder when you go back?
I'm not sure. My mind never shuts up, so it's hard to
And everyone's is going to work a little bit differently, but I find for myself and a lot of clients that like if you kind of if you're trying to like go away from it, it's our mind is going to chatter and talk us through and reason. Oh, but if you do this, you might get hurt, or if you do this, this might happen. And so that's just our lovely mind, and our intuition is going to be this soft little pull, this little whisper that's like, yes, go. Do it, like just this little part. And so this exercise is just a great thing to start with. And you want to start with really small things like this that don't matter so that you start to trust what it says. And this is the most important part in trusting our intuition, is that you then follow through with what this is. Because I always say it's God's way of testing us to be like, oh, are you sure you're going to listen? Because then when you ask the big question and I lean you forward and you back out of it, you try to make excuses of it, that doesn't work. Like, I need you to try this and trust this, because that's how you then excel forward. I always use the example. I was going to pick up my daughter from school, which now we found out that our kids went to the same school. And I was going to pick her up there and from our old house. And I always would take this like shortcut to get there. And I heard so strongly, like, take a left. And I'm like, I'll be late. I'm going to be late to pick her up. And it was like so strong. And I was like, you know what? I trust this. I trust this voice. I've learned to trust it. And so I took a left and I was totally late. And I was like, why? On the way back, I said, why did you make me go that way? And I heard, you don't know what you avoided had you gone the alternate route. And that's what our intuition is here for. It's like, it's going to tell us things that we want to override because we don't have the logical sense to understand it, but it's there to guide us in ways that we need to expand ourselves. So we have to trust and we have to say yes, because that's how you then say, okay, I'm making the chicken and I have to go to the grocery store. And then I meet this person who affects my life in this way, or it opens up this new part, or the fifth thing that I ask is what then opens life up. But it's saying yes to actually that little nudge. So this is a great homework tool to just play with.
Well, and I love the idea that you have to say yes to it. That's the only way you can really trust it, right? Yeah. Is that you're like, oh, I don't know, should I? Okay, I'll do it. And then you do it, and then it works out in the way that you would hope, expect, or better than you could expect. And then you're like, oh. And I look at my life, and for me, it was just, my intuition and God, like it's one and the same. It was, as a kid, I was always praying. I had like an open dialogue with God all the time, just talking, praying through my car accident, through my cancer, always talking, praying, just all the time. Not even like formal where I'm sitting down on my knee. Like I'm just like, hey, God, I'm just talking and praying. And I loved, I read Neil Donald Walsh's book, Conversations with God. And that really opened me up, to the idea of like, a lot of people believe that God stopped talking to us 2,000 years ago. And it's like that, like logically, that doesn't make much sense to me. Right. Like, and why would there only be, if you believe children of God, like these are the chosen ones, he only talks to you and not to you. And, so anyway, and I think that for anybody listening, like that technique you just taught, the rocking forward, that's an example of a technique. Totally. It could be meditation, it could be prayer, it could be journaling, right? There are so many, but I think that the most important thing that I think that you taught is, number one, you've got to actually get quiet and you've got to tune in. That's number one. And then number two, you have to act on it. And then reinforce, oh, wow, this really is guiding me. And anything else to share before we wrap on how someone can access their intuition? Any other tips or tricks or
that's a great
strategies?
question. It's funny. I thought a second ago and this gave me, I was going to say the conversations with God. That one thing too for intuitive voice is that people always question, I think you mentioned this beginning, like what voice am I hearing? And oftentimes it's our own voice that we are hearing that comes through. And so that is a good reminder because yes, it's our same voice that we hear in the thinking side, but it also can be the same voice on the intuitive side. There are some people, I actually have a different voice that comes through for me. And I don't know why, but I find it's like 1% of people that have that experience. So knowing that it's your same voice is an important part. The distinction one of my mentors shared with me, Dr. Maura Moynihan, is she said that it's going to sound different. So our intuition is going to be a little bit softer voice, a little bit more of a whisper, while our mind is a little bit louder and talks a lot. Yeah. And that was such a big distinction for me. She shared that to me when I was going through postpartum anxiety, which I was like, couldn't quiet this. And it was such a great distinction to be like, oh, okay, if I just wait for the whisper, I wait for the calm voice to come in, that's the one I can trust.
I love that. It's so true. How do you know it's your voice? If it won't shut up and it's talking a lot and it's loud and it's right, like, and then the intuition, the voice of God, where it's like, hey, no, dude, come on, you know better than that. You know better. You know what's right. You know what you're supposed to do. Stop reasoning it away, justifying it, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's such an important distinction. And you mentioned about sometimes the voice is your own. Sometimes the voice, it feels like it's someone else. Something that I do is I often, when I get these downloads, I journal to myself and for me, I imagine it's from God. And it starts out, Hal, you really are living in excessive stress right now. And the reason you're doing and it's just like, it's like someone, like I'm talking to a therapist or whatever going, Hal, here's what's going on. Here's what you're doing. Here's why it's happening. And there's something that allows me, because it's like now I'm out of my own head where I'm overthinking and reasoning. I'm like, no, I'm listening to the wisdom from higher consciousness, like wherever this is coming from. this. And so it's like, I write it to myself and it changes the paradigm. And then I'll go back and
Yes.
maybe turn it into an affirmation where I'll go, okay, I got all this wisdom that somebody wrote to me. God wrote to me. And then now, I'm going to turn it into an affirmation so that I can take it on for myself.
Yes. I write the same way.
What are the other, so what all, you mentioned you turn this into a career. Like, what do you do with, I know you have, I don't know all the things you have. I've looked at your website, but like, you tell me, what are the different ways that you help people and how do you help them?
Totally. Great question. So I offer one-on-one readings like what we did. So that's going to be, you meet with me. Most of my clients are on Zoom, but they can also come to my house and meet me in person.
If you live in the same neighborhood, just come on over.
Yes, exactly. And the cool part about readings is that it's not anything specific that like, I don't know what we're going to do. There's so many parts that we can go into. I mean, I find that usually people are coming because they're in search of something. Sometimes they can identify it, sometimes they can't. But what I love is that we have the access to go to so many different points. And sometimes it's really future based and sometimes it's really past life based or past this life that we need to let go. And we can let go of money wounds and we can let go of witch wounds and we can really work deeply in who you are. I think even when there's mediumship that comes in, which is very common, that's part of it as well. I always say that what the readings are here for is to support you on your path, because that's what your angels want. That's what your guides want. Everyone wants you to be successful. And so that's what the messages kind of all circulate around. So that's a one-on-one reading. But then I work with clients. My favorite is to work with, women, but I actually have I'm doing a men's group reading coming up, but typically I work with like groups of women. And so I'm offering a 10-month women's mastermind that we're starting in April. And this one is really about accessing all the channels that you can, that like, if you want to access like clairvoyance, if you want to access connecting to spirit babies, if you want to access truly your guidance, that this one is kind of all encompassing of that. And so I've been working with women's groups for a few years now. And I kind of always change. This is the new one coming out, but I also offer a free group reading every month. This is a space you can come, you could get a reading, you could not get a reading. It's a big Zoom group, but it's always a fun space to be like,
that's cool. So you're like witnessing other people get readings and kind of, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And then you can always come, like some people come and they keep their camera off because they don't want to have a reading, and then I won't channel for you, but then others like want to have the access to it. So I do that. And I do Monday writing. It's a free call on Mondays and we sit together for an hour and we channel writing and connect with other people. And then I always say, I never know what's next. Like I didn't plan this mastermind. I was like, I don't know if I want to take a break from groups. And it just was like, whew, this is what you're doing. And I actually had 3 other women who are going to be part of it say that they had created a list of what they were going to bring to me that they wanted me to lead them through. And it was like the same thing. So I was like, oh, wasn't just my soul. This is a bigger message coming together. So yeah, it's always like, I don't know what's going next. I have a 12-week course, online course as well that I have available. That is like the first one starts with the rocking exercise and then goes more into depth with other pieces of it. But it's a 12-week program in connecting to your intuition, essentially.
And so the website, the best place to find you, the soulsourceress.com. Can you spell that? I just want to sorceress is not a word that I use very often.
Yes, this one is not the correct sorceress spelling either. Yeah. So it's soul, SOUL, and then source, SOURCE, and then RESS.
Okay. And the word "the" is in there. I found that out.
Sorry. Soul Sourceress. And it's the same for my Instagram is probably, if you have Instagram, is like where everything is super updated and like have everything, all the testimonials and links and stuff on there. So my website is, but I would
What's your IG handle?
The Soul Sorceress. So same. Okay. Yes. At that one's. Cool. It's all on there.
All right. Well, y'all, I the reason that I went and did a reading with Marissa is I wanted to see if she was legit before I brought you on. Right. Like, and so, and I walked away with a ton of insights and wisdom, and I recorded the session. I went back and listened to it. And I'm literally taking action on the intuition that the wisdom, the channeling that you did. So, and that's why, in all transparency, I don't know if you know that, Marissa, but I was like, all right, I'm either going to decide whether or not she'll be on the podcast. from this experience. So yeah, everybody, I encourage you to check it out, the soulsourceress.com. And more than anything, get out of your head and get into your spirit and tune into your intuition. You do that in periods of peaceful, purposeful silence, not when it's noisy, not when you're, checking emails or just not when there's any noise, either aesthetic or visual noise or auditory noise. It's got to be in those periods of peaceful, purposeful silence. So, Marissa, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for being on today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
All right. Goal achievers and members of the Miracle Morning community, I love you so much. Listen to your intuition and use it every day. And I'll talk to you soon.